This episode of the Boat Geeks is sponsored by The Boater's Guide, a free app for Pacific Northwest boaters. The Boater's Guide is adventure and information, right at your fingertips, right when you need it. Find your happy place with The Boater's Guide, a free download on your phone or tablet in the App Store and Google Play.
All right, here's another very special episode of the Boat Geeks podcast, recorded live on location at the Port Townsend Wooden Boat Festival 2024.
The 47th annual Port Townsend Wooden Boat Festival, which is the granddaddy of wooden boat festivals in North America.
Yeah, and for a very good reason. It's a small marina, but they packed that thing full of amazing wooden boats, from the tiniest dinghy
all the way up to motor yachts and big schooners.
Yeah, it was just a pleasure sitting in between each show. We got to stare at all the boats and dream, and it was amazing to see so many beautiful boats in one place, as well as so many amazing and beautiful people in one place.
We met men and women from around the world that are part of this wooden boat universe.
Indeed, and it was a pleasure talking to every single one of them, and we got to meet some of you.
Yeah, some of our listeners and fans we got to interact with, and that was a real treat.
Let's get right into it. Here is the next episode of the Boat Geeks.
From the Port Townsend Wooden Boat Festival and recorded in the Fisheries Supply, live from the Wooden Boat Festival stage, it's the Boat Geeks with Darren and Daeron.
We're the Boat Geeks, whatever floats your boat. We're the Boat Geeks, it's the boat that floats that we love the most. Yes, we love.
Welcome to another episode of the Boat Geeks podcast, special edition, coming to you live from the Port Townsend Wooden Boat Festival 2024. I am your host, Darren.
And I'm your other host, Darren, and we are in the Fisheries Supply live from the Wooden Boat Festival stage. And our guest this morning is the columnist, I guess we could say, for 48 North magazine, Close to the Water. And it's Bruce Bateau, who writes about small boat cruising, which a lot of people are really very interested in.
Now, Bruce, welcome to the podcast, first of all.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
This is an awesome topic. Darren and I love everything about boats. We love any boat that floats, but we are cruisers. That is our primary love of boating. Yep. Now, I don't know where the line is, where it goes from small boat to large boat cruising. And I assume our boats, 40 and 46 foot, are probably considered large boat cruising. Maybe. Do you like or not like the term pocket cruiser?
I'm ambivalent. I figure if you're out there doing it,
who cares?
All
yes,
good,
okay.
Right? So there's all these distinctions. They help people understand stuff.
Right.
But cruising, to me, is cruising. You are going to put your stuff in a vessel.
Yeah.
And you're going to get yourself someplace that's exciting to you.
Yes.
And whether that's in a human-powered boat, a wind-powered boat, a dinosaur-powered boat, it all works.
Yeah.
I like that, dinosaur-powered. Okay.
But you brought up a really good point, and that is, where is the line drawn? I mean, your opinion. What is a small boat, and when does it become not a small boat?
And of course, we know this isn't a hard line and a hard rule, but for you, what do you consider?
I think small boats definitely fall in the realm of trailable with the family car.
Yes.
Good. Okay.
Yeah. Because, there are some smaller boats, I'll just say in the range of what the average boat is, that you need like a Ford F-150 to tow around.
Okay.
And that's not the average family's car.
Yeah.
And I think the nice thing about my definition of small boats is they're open to a wider range of folks who maybe aren't ready to make that level of investment or don't want that lifestyle. Right?
So I bought a 12-foot dinghy and a tent cover.
Yep.
Small boat cruising. All right, there you go.
Totally works.
So what is your background with boating, and where did you fall in love with small boats and cruising and so forth? What is your history?
Yeah. So as a kid, I lived some years in Florida. My family had one of those kind of fish and ski boats, small fiberglass thing, big motor, zoom around, catch things.
Right.
Yeah.
Fall in love with just being on the water. And as a kid, you don't think about what it takes to maintain a boat, launch a boat, whatever, insurance, what's that?
Exactly.
Right. But that was all good fun. And then went through a long period where it was like just doing life. right? Not thinking about boats at all. And there was a stage when I was in my teens and 20s where I got into surfing, surfed every day for many years.
Didn't you surf?
Yeah, I grew up in Santa Cruz, California, and I was a surfer.
Right.
Oh, you're one of those guys who tried to beat me up when I went down there.
No, but I knew those guys, and they were assholes. I'm sorry for that.
No hard feelings. Much of my surfing happened in San Diego. Later, I moved over to the East Coast and did a little surfing there. Won't get into those details because it's a whole. Some people will say a surfboard's a boat. I'm not going to vote on that today.
Well,
but what I will say is there came a point where surfing was not a daily part of my life anymore.
Sure.
Ended up in Portland, Oregon. Small children. There was just no escape.
Yeah.
And one day I was riding my bike on the waterfront path along the Willamette River, which is the smaller of the two rivers in Portland. Mm-hmm. And I noticed all these little boats out there, and they were zigging and zagging back and forth. They weren't going anywhere necessarily, but they were moving, and they looked like freedom.
Yeah.
And so I went down to the club there, Willamette Sailing Club, friendly bunch of folks, very focused on racing. And I could not afford a boat, and I could barely afford the membership fee. But then the guy said to me, if you come during the December boat show, we've got a new guy registration discount. And man, I saved a lot of money so I could get my $400 whenever that was 20 odd years ago to join the club.
Wow, yeah.
And it seemed like a big deal. Now I look at it and I was like, that seems like a reasonable price. But when you're in your 20s and you got little kids at home, man, every penny's just going away.
Yeah.
Anyhow, I found a guy who was selling a laser sailboat. If you don't know those, they're like 12, 14 feet long, single sail, kind of high performance racing.
Seen a lot of them around, yes.
And they're a blast. They were the closest thing to surfing that I had found unintentionally.
Yeah.
The guy who was selling the boat was exactly my size, former surfer. Even the gloves fit me, right?
Oh,
It was perfect, and he was so happy to sell this to me for like $1,000.
Yeah.
And again, that was a huge amount of savings for us at the time.
Oh, for sure.
And so I got someone with a pickup truck to haul it down to the club, and I started sailing them, and I really loved the sailing. I loved, I put on my wetsuit. It was just like surfing again. And the racers down there sail most of the year. And that was perfect for me because I didn't care how cold it was. I wanted to get out there and get wet and feel the wind and get charged up and just escape for a little while. And I loved the sailing, but I did not care at all for the competition. And it scared the heck out of me remembering all those stupid right-of-way rules.
Yeah.
Which now make more sense to me, but at the time it was like port tack, starboard tack, over early, just all these terms.
I just want to go where I want to go.
Yeah. And I did that for a year or so. And then one day I asked one of the guys who was sort of a mentor down there, I was like, do you ever like sail down to the bridge and come back? And he looked at me and he was like, what would we do if the wind died? And at that point, I knew I was sailing the wrong boat. I didn't know where to go next.
Yeah. So in terms of the zigzagging and the racing and that not being appealing to you, and you are more into, I want a destination and just freedom and adventure, connecting that back to your surfing, what kind of surfer were you? I was a longboarder. I liked, and I apply that same with my cruising. I like taking my time.
Yep.
I like the trip. All my friends, that's why I wasn't one of the people, saying, get the hell out of them.
Yeah.
I wasn't, all my friends were the short boards, carving up the waves. That just wasn't my style. Were you a wave carver?
So I liked riding longer boards.
Yeah. Like 7 foot something?
8 footers.
Okay. Yeah.
Longer boards.
I respect that.
But I tended to like to ride, if not giant waves, I like to ride bigger waves, but I would surf anything.
Oh, sure.
But I didn't care for the really short boards that were zigzaggers.
Oh, man. Yeah.
I just wanted to go down the line. I wanted to feel the wave.
Yes.
I wanted to see the dolphins, just all the magic that comes with sitting out there. I surfed at night, to catch the bioluminescence.
That's so cool. Yeah. That's my style surfer. Awesome. So when you're out on the river,
Willamette.
Willamette,
In a laser, and
where do you go from there?
So kind of progression, right? You only know what you know. The internet was young in those days, and you just didn't know. I didn't know what to look for. So eventually, I traded that boat away. I still love sailing lasers. They're just a fantastic machine.
Yeah.
Traded up to another production trailerable sailboat, a Lido 14, kind of a tubby little thing, but you could put the family in it. And what was unique about it, it was dry, right? And I was like, okay, we're getting somewhere now. There's benches in this thing. You can bring a couple people. You could put some sleeping bags in there. it had no means of propulsion except an oar, right? If there was no wind. And you couldn't reef it. But like I was getting there. I was figuring out like you could go somewhere in a boat like this. Right. So evolution. Then I bought a rowboat at the festival here.
Oh, wow.
When my kids were just a little older. I have no idea how we afforded any of this. I'm sure my wife was like, we're just not going to save anything this month.
What year was that when you were here and bought the rowboat?
At least 15 years ago. I can't remember.
So it was just somebody had it out display and for sale, and
I'd learned about the Adirondack Guideboat Company. They are from Vermont. In those days, they built wood and Kevlar guideboats. And if you're not familiar with the guideboat, it's sort of canoe shaped. It has places for up to 3 people. So with 2 kids, you could put 1 kid on either end and you could be in the middle.
Nice.
Or you could create like a sweep crew, right? Where I could be the coxswain in the back and give each kid an oar.
Oh, yeah.
And so it was really adaptable for us. We'd go fishing on it and I'd go exploring. And like I knew this boat, right, could do some things. And in those days, the Adirondack Guideboat folks went on this summer road trip. It was fantastic.
Wow.
And they would come out here with a trailer full of guideboats, and the shipping was free, right? Because they drove it out.
they're here.
I don't know how it worked.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I bought this boat, and that kind of was like the spark of like, okay, now I know where I need to go.
you're getting closer and closer
Right.
to
And so eventually, I did some camping with the rowboat, and I was like, oh, this is good. Now the magic is going to happen when we can row and we can sail. And fast forward a couple years, and I'm out in this rowboat, and I go to the Cascadia Marine Trail, which is a series of it's an organization, right? The Western Water Trails Association. Great people, and they've set up this series of campsites from Olympia all the way up into the San Juans, roughly every 10 miles, that are only open to human and wind-powered beachable craft.
well, that sounds perfect for what you're looking to do.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And so I imagined this thing would be sort of like the Pacific Crest Trail.
Right.
You'd start in Olympia and you'd just find this group of people and you'd go all the way north. Well, I had 3 weeks off from work. My wife, I owe her everything. She was so good to take
Thank
care
you.
of kids. Right.
Yeah.
Right. And the first day out, I was dropped off by some friends. We all went out together. It was great. Spent the night on Hope Island South.
Nice.
And I was like,
Nice
oh
place.
my God, this is the magic right here, right? This is good. And I was so happy. I stayed there for another night because there was no one else on the island after my friends left.
Yeah.
So I was like, I'm just going to wait one more day because this is cool. And then some more people are going to come and then we're going to head north together. Second day, one person turns up, guy in a rowboat. I'm like, okay, there's my people,
That's
right?
right.
And then the next day we left together. And he and I had this great conversation. Hey, I'm a contractor in the winter. I live up in the mountains. I got nothing to do but build boats.
Oh.
And just as he was getting off the trail on the second day, he's like, if you ever want someone to build you a boat, you call me up. Here's my number.
Wow.
And of course, that was way beyond my means or anything.
So you did it.
Well, here's what's really funny. I didn't meet anybody else on the trail after that. It was just deserted out there.
What time of the year was this?
It was in the fall. It was like September. I think the kids had just gone back to school.
Yeah.
So
Best time to be cruising.
it's a
around
great time to be cruising, but it was so lonely.
Yeah.
Yeah. So fast forward, a couple of years, I come into a small, very modest inheritance, call him up. Hey, Andy, are you serious when you said you could build me a boat? And I didn't really know this guy from Adam.
Yeah.
I saw a boat he'd built himself and he was a nice enough guy, but he lived 800 miles away or something.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
But my wife was like, no, I get a good feeling about this guy. I'm like,
Really? Man, you have a wonderful wife.
Yeah.
You really do.
oh, yeah.
Yeah, you come into an inheritance and it's going right into a boat. So what did he say?
He said, heck yeah, I want to build a boat. And he wanted to build.
Nice.
We'd kind of talked about some boats. He introduced me to things that weren't on my radar screen before, right? Things I just didn't know about or like I'd heard about, but it wasn't really real to me.
Like what?
He introduced me to some of the John Welsford designs and some of the Ian Outred designs in particular. Those are the ones that we were kind of fascinated with because they were small. They were designed for cruising. They had oar and sail power. Right? They had all these things that made it self-propelled, that seemed seaworthy. There were a lot of designs out there that were really pretty and sleek. They were either wet or we were just like, I don't know if that's a safe design. And he had built boats before,
Right.
like bigger boats too. And so it was like, I'm going to kind of lean on Andy, but the Outred boats, they're very sleek. They're double-ended. They're based on fishing boats and historic fishing boats.
Okay.
And they just had this salty look that I
Yeah.
was like, that's what I want. I'd met a couple of other sailors who had these boats, and they were doing the adventuring I wanted to do. They were heading north.
Yeah.
They were camping out for days on end on the boats.
Yeah.
And the goal was like going ashore is super part of the fun. But when you have a small boat that can go ashore, it can anchor out and you can sleep on it, you've moved into this whole other realm.
Yeah.
Yep,
Yeah.
yep. It's just giving you options, right? So you can obviously still do whatever you want. If you want to get off and camp on shore, you can. But what was special about the design that made it more comfortable and gave it that usage of being able to sleep on the boat?
Yeah, so the boat that I have, my main boat still after all these years, I think the boat's been in the water about 12 years, is Robert. It's an Ian Outred design called an Arctic Tern. It's 18 feet long, about 5 feet wide, and I'd say it's about 60% sailing, kind of 40% rowing. And it's a boat that you can row at about 3 knots.
Yeah.
Wow.
And, even when it's
Yeah.
fully loaded, right?
It's super fast.
It'll hold an anchor. It'll hold all your camping gear for 3 weeks, as I later learned. All your food, 5 gallons of water. It'll do all that, and there's still a coffin-like space where you can sleep on it.
Which is actually kind of comforting when you're in that space. I know totally. And in fact, I follow some YouTube channels of people that do this exact thing.
Nice.
They'll do it on lakes, they'll do it on rivers, and they're just, and it's one person, and they can sail, they can row, they sleep on the boat. I love it. It looks so fun. Unfortunately, I dove in my first boat 40 feet. So, but I'm working backwards now.
We both fantasize about smaller boats.
Yes.
now.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. There's a balance there, right?
Yeah.
You get something, you trade off something. My experience has been that the smaller boats, for a single person, tend to be used more.
True.
Right? I feel like if you got more humans, that ratio can shift.
Oh, yeah.
But
So I have a 40-foot boat. Barely used it in 4 years. It's been just throwing money, and I'm fine keeping a historical boat.
It's a 1946 Matthews.
Yes.
So it's taken a little work.
Yeah, it's taken a lot of work. It's a thing of its own. It's totally fine. No regrets keeping a piece of history alive. But you're absolutely right. The best boat is one that you're going to be able to use and that you're going to get out on, right? So what goes into your provisioning for it when you're going out? How do you prepare and pack for a trip? What are you taking for food? What are you taking for, other?
Yeah. So just for listeners at home, right? It's an open boat. It has 2 sealed compartments on either end. So you can store things in there and they double as flotation in the event you get swamped or capsized.
Right.
The middle part's open aside from a rowing thwart and some benches. And then so you can put stuff anywhere inside that boat as long as you have access to get to the main mast to raise and lower the sail. And then there's kind of a cockpit area in the kind of center aft part where you need clear just so your sheets don't get tangled on stuff.
Sure.
Outside of that, you have a lot of flexibility. So you can take some luxury items you're not going to take backpacking. You can take stuff you're not going to maybe take in a kayak.
Yeah.
But I tend to like to eat kind of real food, like food that I might eat at home, but also simpler food. So like in summer, I'm going to take a bunch of tomatoes. I'm going to take some hard cheese and put it down in the bilge, right? Stuff that's going to be nourishing and fun to eat.
Yeah.
And I don't want to cook a lot, right? I'm not bringing a big bottle of olive oil and onions to cut up, but I want some stuff that's a little bit more solid than like backpackers food.
Sure.
Yeah.
And when you're out camping, I think this is everybody, but I know for sure everything tastes better when you're out camping, right?
It's absolutely true.
Yeah.
It is
Absolutely true.
Yeah. And in a boat like this, it's like a reasonable day, we're aiming to cover 10, 15 nautical miles.
That's a long trip.
Okay.
Yeah. A good day, we might cover 20, and an epic day is like 30 miles.
Yeah.
What can she do under wind power? What's the fastest you've?
Like when we're at like full sail and it's not scary, it's around 5 knots.
That's great.
Not bad at all. What's the length overall?
18 feet.
18. Okay.
Yeah. And so like an average day though, we're doing 2 or 3 knots, and with a boat like this, it's a lot about being there.
Yeah. Yeah.
And like you're going to get there wherever there is. And that's the nice thing about the oars. Like when we have a larger boat, an 19-foot boat, right? but it has a motor on it. It's
Yeah.
a lot beamier. It's a cat boat.
Yeah.
Right. And like when it's time to turn the motor on at a certain point in the day, like everyone's like,
It's almost depressing, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's-
we got to do that now.
Yeah. And it's a little bit more about the noise than the means of propulsion. Because like it's just so peaceful to be out there sailing.
There's that feeling with, we're both power boaters. When you turn off the engines, it's like, you know, you can, and I love rowing. I just like taking our dinghy out. We're in Ludlow, so I'll just row around the bay there.
Yeah.
And I love it. I love rowing. There's something about it. It's zen, you know, it's just, and what you mentioned, it's all about the journey. We see, you know, hey, whatever boat you love, that's awesome. If you love the race boats and the power boats, that's great.
It doesn't matter.
But we love a good 5 to 7 knots in our big power boats, you know, because to us, it is all about the journey. You know, the destination is just where you're going to sleep or where you're going to end up or whatever. But man, the just smelling the roses along the way or the seawater is what it's all about.
My wife and I, the boat we bought 14 years ago, we moved aboard. We've lived aboard our boat.
Oh, nice.
But prior to that, we had sailboats.
Yeah.
And it wasn't a huge transition mentally because we only gained about 1.5 knots because full displacement, right?
Yeah.
But we always told people it's not about speed because we cruise on a sailor's mentality.
Yeah.
We just enjoy plodding along and taking in every moment.
We live in paradise and it's beautiful. And why do you want to just zip right through it?
Yeah.
You know, again,
Yes.
not
And
knocking
create a
anybody
wake.
that likes to go fast. That's totally fine. Whatever floats your boat.
If you go fast, don't make a big wake and
Yes.
rock Bruce or rock us. I mean, that's okay, but please be nice with your wake.
Please be kind.
And we have to tell people sometimes that they'll come into Port Ludlow at night, and I want to come up to them and say, you realize at night you still leave a wake just because you can't see it. We feel it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Don't never look back. Isn't that the rule?
Yeah.
Exactly.
I like, and you and your boat as well, when we look back, there's nary a wake.
Oh, that's a good haul.
Yeah, it's not a troller, but round bottom and easily push through the water.
I like you already.
So now, where is your favorite place to cruise now these days? Do you like it up in the Puget Sound? I asked you prior to recording about the Columbia.
Yeah.
My wife and I, when we first moved up here about 8 years ago, we lived in Rossburg, which was right across the river from Astoria. We didn't. Sorry, Rossburg, but we didn't really like the area much. So we spent most of our time while we were looking for a place to move, which ended up being Port Townsend, over in Astoria. And we fell in love with Astoria. Of course, I knew it already and loved it from Goonies and other things. But
Kindergarten Cop.
Yes.
Don't forget that one. It's not a tumor.
But we loved the Columbia. We fell in love with the Columbia, and that whole process of living there. We've been from Astoria all the way up to the Dalles, and I love that river.
It's
It's
awesome.
now my favorite river that I've ever been able to see. So
Have you been in some of the back channels, like down in the
No.
lower Columbia?
I have, because I actually owned my first boat.
Yeah.
On Hayden Island.
Oh, nice.
And I mean, it was a Newport 28.
Yeah.
But we would go all around where draft allowed because you have to be very careful up there. But I started reading your articles way back when you were writing about small boat cruising on the Columbia River.
Yes.
And when I talked to you, I was like, that's where I associate you with. From when was it? When did you start writing about your cruising?
I think I started writing. Well, I had a blog almost from the time that we started building Rowbird.
Okay.
But I started writing for 48 North, for 3 Sheets Northwest.
Yes, that's right.
Like, I can't remember, 10 years ago or something. And I kind of just connected with Deborah, who was running at the time.
Deborah and Marty. Yeah.
And she was really supportive. And she was one of those editors who like looked at your work and she made it better, which is really nice.
Yeah, that's a good editor.
And it was just fun to write for them. And it was also like, there's a lot of big boats out there. And like, here's another voice.
Yes, absolutely.
And my whole thing again is like, every boat is fun and it serves a purpose.
Yeah.
So I'm never like, your boat's stupid. Unless you're doing like, 20 knots through the anchorage and waking all of us, right?
Yeah.
And that happens with a few bozos, but 95% of the boaters
Right.
out there are great.
So back to the Columbia, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Because for me and my wife, we have a someday. Someday we're going to get down and we are going to explore the Columbia from Astoria all the way as far as we can go.
Yep.
And I don't know about the back channels. I'm already sold on doing this someday, but sell me more. Tell me about the Columbia, cruising on the Columbia, your experiences. What was great about it?
So what's really great about the Columbia is it's kind of a zen place, and you can find really quiet spots.
Yeah.
That's the first thing. There are definitely places where it's like up towards the Columbia Gorge, where it's like on a Saturday summer afternoon.
Forget about it. Yeah.
It's just like being at a beehive, right?
Yeah.
There's boats.
You got Interstate 84 on one side, and then what is it, 14 on the other
Yep.
end? Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
And all these people on watercraft just going all crazy.
Right, and like it, again, that's
It's
all part
great.
of the boating experience.
Yes.
But you can go to that same place a month later.
Yeah.
And you can have it all to yourself. The spires of rock sticking up out of the river. You can see Cape Horn and the waterfalls falling down. But where my favorite spot on the Columbia is the river kind of makes a big S curve a bunch of times, and then it comes down as it flattens out right near Cathlamet, Washington, at about River Mile 40. It kind of creates this kind of big hourglass shape. And that's where there's a main channel on the northerly kind of Washington shore for like ships and deep draft vessels. And then off to the other side, there's 10,000 acres of National Wildlife Refuge. There's channels and sloughs and just these little backwater spots, these ancient kind of settlements, for lack of better words.
Yeah.
And there's a few local boats back there. They know how to get through. There are some, if not dredge channels, they are marked.
Right.
And then there are places, if you have a thin water boat, that'll float in a couple feet of water or maybe more, but you don't mind getting dried down or hitting a sandbar. There's so much more out there.
Oh, yeah.
And so when you go into these areas, there's some human history. There's some natural history that's pretty impressive. And there's this mixing of all these different things, culture, nature, and you can have it all to yourself in the summer. It's fresh water. You can swim in it. And
Sold.
I know.
You can have an anchorage to yourself for days on end if you wish to.
Yeah.
And yet at the same time, you can pull into a really charming marina in Cathlamet. There are some places further upriver that have these really funky marinas that are ceasing to exist around Puget Sound because they're priced out. There's character there still.
Character.
Yes.
That's a good way to describe it.
And there's a sense of adventure because some places everyone's looking at their chart plotter. Even if you're looking at a real chart, it's pretty clear cut. It's like there are not a lot of surprises out here. The conditions are their surprises, right? But navigationally, there are no surprises.
Right.
And down there, it's like no, you're active, you're involved, no matter what craft you're in, because there's logs, there's shoals, there's sandbars, there's just
And it changes
And
constantly,
they are
right?
changing, yeah.
yeah. There's stuff underwater there from like 1900s, I'm sure, of like people just threw in. So I have a friend with a little houseboat down there, and he loves diving down into the river and dredging up bottles.
Oh, wow.
'cause it
we
was
were
like-
just talking about collecting bottles.
Yeah, there's all kinds of junk down there.
I used to be in antiques, and those old bottles just sell well constantly.
Oh yeah,
I learned to sail on the Columbia River.
yeah.
And,
Which part?
right off of northeast Portland, like 33rd.
Right
it was-
between the highways.
Yeah, well, it was an ASA course,
Yeah.
right? Basic keel boat,
Yeah.
and the guy ran it out of his, floating home.
Nice.
But anyway, and then got my first boat. I bought another boat, and all there on the Columbia. So I spent a lot of time. In fact, I'll have to get you, if you still have a VHS tape player. I made a cruising guide to the Columbia River,
Nice.
like in 1999.
Fantastic.
From Warrenton
Yeah.
to Beacon Rock State Park. And I went into all the marinas and showed you what was there and stuff like that. It was
That's
on
awesome.
VHS tape, though. I still have a couple
that'd
copies
be
left. So
fun.
I had some experience, and then I moved up here, and then I started reading Bruce's work about those things you just talked about, and I'm like, oh, damn, I missed all that. I knew it was there, but you look on the chart and like, well, I have, a 5'6" draft. I can't go in there.
Right. But in some places, like Sam McKinney has a book about cruising the Columbia River, and he notes like places where he's anchored out for days on end. And like there's also towns for deep draft, like there's Ilwaco on the North Shore.
Yeah.
You know, and they're kind of working class places. And I think sometimes people get real yachty and they're like, oh, I don't go there.
We love it.
Ilwaco is one of our favorite places to stay.
That's
I dock
awesome.
walk every single night there. It's just, I love Ilwaco.
And it's like the folks are friendly, they're welcoming,
Yes.
it's interesting, and it's unvarnished.
Yeah.
And to me, that makes you into a traveler when you show up at these places and not necessarily a tourist.
Yes.
Right.
Right? You're there to experience and partake and engage, and it just makes it so interesting.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's kind of what keeps me coming back.
We lived in Friday Harbor, and my wife lived in Bayfield, Wisconsin, tourist spots, right? And she had a saying, she says, there's a big difference between a tourist and a traveler. The tourist leaves their manners at home, but the traveler travels with their manners.
Well said.
And so I've always thought that that's pretty applicable even to us cruising and boating wherever we go.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
Awesome. So now, I did front load that question. I said, where is your favorite place to cruise? Now tell me about the Columbia. That may not be your favorite place to cruise. So where are some of your favorite places to cruise?
I will say I love the Lower Columbia just because it's so special, especially in the fall. But my favorite places that I've been in the boat are north. Give me salt, give me rocks, give me strange marine creatures, and especially big marine creatures, and I'm going to be really happy.
So what have you seen while you're out there? But I'm sure you've seen some orcas.
everything, right?
Oh yeah. So one of my favorite trips is I had a sabbatical from work in about 2018 or 2019, just before the pandemic. And a friend trailered my boat and myself all the way to the north end of Vancouver Island,
Oh, wow.
dropped me off in Port
Hardy
O'Neill.
or Port Hardy
Port
is
McNeil.
not. Port McNeil, yeah.
Yeah. And basically said, see you in a couple weeks.
Nice.
And so I headed out into the Broughtons there.
Yeah.
It's an archipelago of dozens, if not hundreds of islands.
Our favorite place.
Yeah.
I one of my favorite books, The Curve of Time.
Yeah. She tells it so well.
Yeah, and that just super inspirational for me someday getting up there. But I can imagine that must have been amazing for you.
For the small boat cruiser, though, I mean,
It's a whole different experience.
Gosh, you could spend 10 years just cruising around.
Yes, you could.
The Broughtons alone.
Yes. And so I kind of, I bought a Wagner guide, great book.
Yeah.
And I also took a kayaker's guide by a guy named John Camantis, The Wild Coast.
Great.
And when you have these two books, it's almost like they're writing about two different places.
Yeah.
And The Wild Coast talks a lot more about natural history. It talks a lot more about the details of the currents. Because in a bigger boat, you're going to turn the motor on and you're going to try and work with the currents, but you're going to power through it. In a little boat like mine, no, you're not going through there.
The currents up here, people have no idea that aren't from here. Yeah.
Correct. And up there are subtleties about even like there are things that twist around islands that a bigger boat you wouldn't pass by, but I'm going to go through that passage. And so like not far from Port McNeil, I went through Canoe Passage, which a big boat would never go through because it's choked with kelp. And I believe it has a shallow spot that you could only, like a local boat might go through, but only at high tide could you pass.
Is that near Lagoon Cove?
It is
It's
north of there.
Okay.
Ways.
Because I think I know the one you're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah. But the main point really is like it's narrow.
Yeah.
And it's like it's rocky, and it's like the kind of thing where if I hit a rock, I'm going 2 knots. I might scrape my hull.
Yep.
And a bigger boat might be sunk or stuck on it for a while, and just it gives you different chances. On the other hand, when it gets shitty out there,
Yeah. There's pros and cons.
this boat is it's not going to save you. You're going to save you.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, it's a good boat.
and that's the adventure, right? What is the draft on that boat?
Centerboard up. It's maybe less than a foot.
Nice.
Yeah, that's great.
Nice.
Yeah.
I thought it was interesting that those two books were written in two different worlds.
Yeah.
And you're on a boat that can exist in both.
Well, that's
really
the neat
cool.
thing about this boat.
Yeah.
And I want to note, like, a beginner's not going to take a boat like this and get dropped off in the Broughtons and have a
Of
good
course,
time.
yeah.
That trip is sort of the culmination of years of experience, right, and practice and training. And it's not like I'm better than anyone else. I just put in the time. I had a really good mentor, And he's like, you got to be able to reef that thing in 30 seconds. And we did drills.
Yeah.
He's like, if you haven't capsized that boat intentionally a bunch of times and bailed it out and gotten it righted, you don't have any business on the river. So it was stuff like that that we went through to build the skill, to build the calluses on your hands. Right, to understand every inch of like, how do you fix that boat? What do you do if this happens?
Well, and also in a situation like that, a small boat, I mean, any boats can go down quickly.
Yeah.
When you're in a panic situation, I don't think straight, so it's something that does need to be ingrained, that you need to train.
Muscle memory.
And I think that's a very important point, is that we're not talking about calm lakes. We're talking about Pacific Northwest waters, lots of, huge tide changes, currents, all kinds of things to consider.
Back eddies.
Yep. And
rock hard things under the water.
It does take training, but it is absolutely achievable.
Totally.
Yeah. And a wonderful experience. But I'm sorry, I don't want to detour too much, but you're talking about wildlife. One of my favorite things up here absolutely is the wildlife. That makes every trip. If we see anything when I'm out, I'm so happy.
Yeah.
What have been some of your favorite wildlife experiences?
So I will note, when I was dropped off, I was absolutely frightened. Like, there was no one piece of the trip that I was like, oh, I can't do that. I will tell you about a crossing of the Strait of Georgia a little bit later.
Okay, yeah.
But initially it was just like, I've got 3 weeks worth of food on this boat. I've got at least a week's worth of water on the boat. Couldn't carry anymore.
Sure.
And like, I just don't know what's going to happen from here. Can I handle this, right? Can I handle it emotionally? Can I handle it physically? And the first 24 hours were just like, rock my world here, folks. I thought I'd done a lot of adventuring, but until I got there, it was like, no, you're just starting the journey, dude.
This is the Olympics of what you're doing.
Yeah. It was kind of like, you're either at the top of the game here, or you're going to experience the agony of defeat. Right? And my friend who brought me up there, he's a boater. He was so understanding and kind, but he was also like, just go. You just got to get out there. You got to start.
Yeah.
And my second day out, I was completely fogged in, and I was not going to waste. My whole thing was, I got dropped off in like late July or August, I can't remember, with the goal of making it back home by the end of September or October at the latest, recognizing like as I traveled south, the weather would get a little more fair, but Johnstone Strait scared the heck out of me. Crossing the strait scared the heck out of me. I could not figure out any way to ship the boat home, so I knew I had to get home. Like, I talked to some of these kind of, I don't know what they're called. Like, they have these supply boats that kind of travel around and drop stuff off in places.
Yeah, they even rent rooms out, or staterooms.
Right. And I asked, like, can you crane my boat on? Like, well, if it's on a pallet, we can do it, but we're not picking up. It's like, okay, I get it. So it's like, I knew I was totally on my own unless someone was kind enough to tow me part of the way, which didn't seem ideal anyway.
You had to do it on your own bottom.
Right. And so I wasn't going to waste any days where I didn't have to. Like, if I got winded in from a storm or whatever, like, I knew I'd be sitting in the boat for days on end.
Sure.
I'm not going out in 20 knots of wind to start out. If I get out in 20 knots, I'm going to handle it. But that's not
You don't go out
sailing.
on purpose. Yeah.
Right.
No schedule when you're out boating.
Right. No schedule, but to move when possible.
Yes.
And so every day I had to plan A, B, and C. Like, this is where I'd like to get to. If it poops out, I'm going to get here. But as soon as, like, one plan shifted, then, like, C, D, and E had to be developed.
Exactly. Yeah.
And so, like, the first day out, I was just like, okay, there's something 5 miles away, and I don't navigate with electronics. I had full-sized paper charts that were, like, the waterproof material.
Yeah.
I got them printed somewhere. And so it was like, no, you're going to figure this out. For the record, just for folks who are planning a trip like this, I had a Garmin InReach unit, so I could send an emergency message. I had the ability to turn on, it pairs with your phone, so I had the ability to see where I was and to get all the conditions if I wanted them, but I only used that as sort of like a trusted friend after I thought I knew where I was, right? Or if I was completely lost in a fog and like my safety was at risk. But I had no intention of calling anyone. I just felt it is stupid to put yourself or others in a position for my sake of adventure.
Sure.
Yeah.
That I'm going to go out there and do something dumb.
Right.
Because you're a responsible boater. That's why.
I'm trying. So anyway, I creep along the shore of the first island. I know there's a gap here. I take a compass bearing. I could see a mile or so. I wasn't going to get clobbered, right? Or I hoped I wouldn't get clobbered. But I was real careful about navigating point to a physical object. And I was halfway to that next destination, and I paused just to kind of look around, check my bearing, and all that. And in a rowboat, you're always facing backwards, right?
Right.
And all of a sudden, I hear this.
Oh, that sound.
Yeah.
Yes, the whale sound. But what I did not realize what kind of whale it was, and it was a pod of orcas that was going the opposite direction of me. And I worked in marine science early in my career, so I'd been around dolphins, I'd been in the water with all kinds of things, but never with an orca. And they passed as close from you to me in the boat, like a dozen of them. Wow. And I could not believe how fast they moved. I'd seen them before, but never that close.
Yeah.
And I think in the small boat, they either recognized me as benign or just like, there's just something over there and it's not interesting to us.
Yeah. It's a good thing they're not like those orcas out in
off the coast of
like
Portugal.
we're talking to yesterday. That must have been a life-changing experience. When we drop everything when there's orcas around.
Yeah,
they're majestic. They're amazing. Do you know by any chance whether they were the locals or if they were?
They passed by so fast.
Yeah.
I mean, like literally, I watched them. I saw them.
Yeah,
I couldn't have touched one, but like they could have touched me, no problem. Right. They were that close. I'm sure some might have gone under. And then the same day, I end up in the full sunshine, a little farther away, but not too much farther away from a bunch of humpbacks.
Yeah.
Right. And it was just like, my mind was blown at that point.
Yeah.
It was just like full capacity. How much more amazing, beautiful, profound can this trip get?
Yeah.
And that second day kind of set the tone for like, you never know what's going to be around the corner.
Darn right. Yeah. And so I'm sure you've seen harbor porpoises and eagles and pretty much everything that you could under the sun.
Yeah.
What an experience. That's one of the, again, there's so many beautiful things about the Pacific Northwest. Whether it be the shorelines, the water, the boats up here, the mountains, every direction you got mountains, the wildlife, and what a way to experience it on a small boat.
He's continuing to experience it and enlighten others. So pick up a copy every month of 48 North and turn the pages to Close to the Water and read about Bruce's adventures cruising in a small boat.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's very exciting stuff.
Bruce, thank you so much for coming by and sharing with us your experiences. I already knew I was going to have a lot of interest in talking to you, but even more now. I haven't read any of your articles. I only came into boats like, 7 years ago when we came to the Wooden Boat Festival after we first moved here. Yeah. But I'm a new boater, and I've only owned a boat for 4 years. So I have so much more ahead of me to explore and to learn, and authors that I, want to read and so forth. And Darren does a great job.
Isn't his enthusiam, though, contagious?
It's fantastic.
That's why I love it. It's like reliving, just rediscovering boating again through Darren and Rebecca. It's cool.
Yeah, and I have fallen in love with the cruising up here and the rivers, and the experience that you're seeking is absolutely it resonates with me completely. So if you have any interest in cruising or experiencing any of this, learning about it, please check them out in 48 Degrees North. And is there anything else? Do you have a blog going still that you'd like to direct people to? Or I have a blog. It's called Terrapin Tales. Terrapin Tales at WordPress.com. Awesome. Good. So check that out as well.
Put it right here so people can read it.
And it'll be in the show notes.
Yeah.
Anything else you'd like to say before we're out of here?
No, it's fun talking with you. I'm glad you're doing what you're doing.
Yeah.
We're down in Ludlow. That's where we do our podcast usually, and we have our studio there. We'd love to have you back if you would be.
Come back and regale us with more stories.
Yeah,
it'd be my pleasure.
Like for example, the Georgia crossing.
Yeah. Okay, save that one.
I'll just tell you, it's sphincter tightening.
Yes, I can only imagine, and that is going to be a good cliffhanger for having you back to the podcast.
Yes.
Thank you for being here. This has been another episode of the Boat Geeks podcast, and until next time, whatever floats your boat.